The reality is, most trans and gender diverse people don't experience equal treatment.
Simply because of who we are.
An ally is someone who's not transgender, that is cisgender, and wants to support the trans community.
Having great allies who stand by our side and help elevate trans voices makes a massive difference.
So, what does it take to be a great ally?
It's pretty unlikely that you've experienced transphobia if you're not trans.
It's not possible to learn if you're unwilling to listen.
And who better to learn about being trans from than trans people?
Listening to and appreciating the experiences of trans people
Allows you to better understand where we're coming from.
We all have unique experiences based on our identity and background.
trans women,
Non-binary people,
disabled people,
Trans people of colour.
and all other different intersections with being trans.
Will all have their own unique experiences.
Recognize that as an ally, you're there to help, but not take charge of or speak over a movement, because that can drown out voices that already don't get heard enough. Stepping back and making room for people who aren't often heard is a really positive thing.
celebrating our differences,
And providing a platform for cisgender people to hear them.
Is an incredibly powerful form of support.
transphobia refers to behavior that insults,
Discriminates against.
or oppresses trans people.
It comes in all shapes and forms.
And familiarizing yourself with the different types
Will help you stand up against them.
Intentional transphobia is when someone goes actively out of their way to insult, belittle, or hurt a person because they're trans.
Things like name-calling, excluding someone from social events, being cruel, and deliberately misgendering someone.
All fall under this category.
Unintentional transphobia tends to be a little bit more subtle.
It can even include slip-ups or mistakes.
Subconsciously making assumptions about a person's gender.
saying someone should look a certain way.
and automatically assuming someone's pronouns based on their appearance.
Can all be examples of unintentional transphobia.
Then there's systematic transphobia.
These are large-scale, society-wide issues.
Think about issues like employment discrimination,
Whether or not trans people are able to use the correct bathrooms.
And how trans people are portrayed in the media.
These broader, systemic forms of transphobia.
Impact the way we think about and interact with trans people on a day-to-day basis.
What all of these issues have in common
Is that they impact trans people's rights at a system-wide level.
Now, these categories aren't hard and fast rules. They can and do overlap.
for example, systemic problems often cause unintentional transphobia.
By affecting the default assumptions we have about trans people.
And intentional transphobia can reinforce systemic issues.
Transphobia isn't always intentional, but it is always damaging.
As an ally, it's important to speak up when you encounter it.
Use your knowledge to educate other people.
Sometimes conversations about gender diversity can be met with emotion.
Gender is a topic that's super close to home for us as trans people.
is often the reason many of us experience abuse and discrimination.
It can be really tiring to constantly argue.
For the simple right to exist and be safe.
And some people may not want to answer your questions or discuss their experiences with you.
And it's important not to expect one person to have all the answers.
It can be exhausting to be expected to provide answers.
For absolutely every parts of being trans.
So don't be annoyed if someone can't or doesn't feel like answering.
And as we've said in our previous videos, some questions are just rude or not appropriate to ask someone if you don't know them very well.
There's a whole world of information out there.
As well as videos just like this one with great resources created by trans people.
So don't hesitate to check those out too.
There can be a bit of an expectation that trans people should be the ones.
Breaking down gender roles, barriers and binaries.
And be the change makers.
And to be fair, we often are.
However, if a trans person happens to present in a way that's not what you might expect,
Or is actually kind of stereotypical for their gender, that's their right too.
Trans people are often held to super difficult standards.
If we aren't stereotypical enough, we get misgendered.
But if we're too stereotypical, we get accused of reinforcing gender roles. It's important that trans people aren't the only ones expected to be breaking down outdated ideas about gender.
We often have less room to do it than our cisgender peers.
Having great cisgender allies by our side.
Working together to create more inclusive ideas about gender
Is awesome and makes a huge difference.
You don't have to wait for a trans person to come out to you to become an ally.
Educating yourself and working to create environments that are more inclusive will support trans people in coming out.
Here are some easy ways to get started.
Introducing yourself with your name and pronouns.
This can let trans people know that it's safe to tell you our pronouns too.
Fight transphobia when you see it.
Let people know that their behaviour or use of language could be hurtful to someone who's trans.
Never assume anyone's gender identity.
Use gender-neutral language until they let you know what they prefer.
Put up posters or resources that include or focus on gender identity.
In your school, uni, or workplace.
And make sure they were created by trans people.
Raise money for an organisation that supports trans people.
Intersectionality matters here too.
If it's for trans young people, it should be led by trans young people.
If it's for disabled trans people, it should be led by disabled trans people.
And if it's about trans people of colour, it should be led by trans people of colour.
And if it's, well, you get the idea.
Finally, elevate the voices of trans people wherever possible.
Host an event that includes a trans guest speaker and consult trans people on how to make your space more trans inclusive.
Another great place to start is supporting the people around you.
A supportive friend or family member can have a huge positive impact for a trans person.
That's why being a champion for those around you can be a really powerful thing.
If you found this video helpful, share it online to help more people become awesome allies.
And if you want to know more, check out the rest of Trans 101.
Our series all about gender diversity.